2005 was a totally different time in IndyCar racing. The infamous open-wheel split was still raging, and in some ways CART, now known as the Champ Car World Series, and the IRL, known as the IndyCar Series, were further apart than ever before. Once boasting one of the most challenging and diverse schedules in all of auto racing, Champ Car was a shadow of its former glory. Hemorrhaging sponsorship and manufacturer support, Champ Car had evolved into mostly a road racing series, and in order to stay afloat had begun to chase large, international sanctioning dollars outside of the United States, and rarely raced on oval tracks by 2005. On the other side of the war, the IRL had stayed more or less true to at least one of the core values that the series was founded on, that being a commitment to Indy-style oval racing. In 2004, the IRL hosted 16 events at 15 different tracks, all ovals. But as the calendar changed to 2005, the days of an all-oval IndyCar series were over forever. Spanning from March 6th to October 15th, the 2005 schedule had expanded to 17 races at 17 different tracks. Nazareth and the second Texas race had been replaced by road courses at Infineon and Watkins Glen. But the first time the Indy Racing League would turn right would be on the streets of St Petersburg, Florida. Now, racing was nothing new in St. Pete. Trans Am had raced on the streets in the mid to late 80s, and the IRL race wouldn't even be the first IndyCar race held in downtown St. Petersburg. 2 years earlier, CART had held the inaugural St. Petersburg Grand Prix as we know it today. That event was won by Paul Tracy for Forsyth Racing and deemed to be a success, but CART's bankruptcy at the end of 2003 put the brakes on hard for a 2004 sequel. For 2005, the event had been revived by Andretti Green Promotions on behalf of the Indy Racing League. Michael Andretti said this of the IRL's move to road racing and the part he played in it.
We just felt that it was very important for open wheel racing, to get back on the streets again and for the IRL, and I think it's a big step, and hopefully it's going to open it up to many, many more events like this around the country.
St. Pete was the third race on the 2005 calendar. The season had opened at Homestead Miami Speedway and was won by Dan Wheldon. The championship trail then moved on to Phoenix, where Sam Hornish Jr. would win the last IndyCar race at the track before NASCAR ruined it. Many such cases. Speaking of ruining things, ESPN and ABC's coverage made a crucial change for 2005. Paul Page had been the voice of IndyCar racing on the network since 1987. But at the end of 2004, IndyCar asked ESPN to make a change to the TV coverage in an effort to appeal to younger viewers and increase sagging TV ratings. ESPN's answer was to replace Paul Page with a guy named Todd Harris. Harris had worked as a pit reporter during the 2004 IndyCar season for ABC, but his background was extreme sports, namely the X Games, which was huge in the 2000s, so on paper, Harris was exactly the guy needed to tell the story of IndyCar racing to the next generation of young people. However, in reality, 11-year-old me was very confused when it was not Paul Page standing next to Scott Goodyear at Homestead. I figured Paul was sick or something and he would be back soon. But Todd Harris would remain the voice in my living room for the rest of the year. Whether it was describing every incident as an unfortunate turn of events, or asking if Danica could turn the trick on a regular basis, my memory of Harris's commentary style was that it was pretty cringe. And upon rewatching this race, Harris is not nearly as bad as I remember him being, but I honestly wonder if that's just because modern commentary standards are just that low these days. I do think it's fair to say that ABC threw Todd Harris to the wolves, and I also think that there is a chance he could have developed into a solid play-by-play guy for IndyCar if he'd been given a couple more years working under the guidance of Paul Page to get a better grip on how to give a modern spin to IndyCar coverage without cheapening the product. And honestly, the product that the IRL was selling in 2005 was pretty damned good. While Champ Car was on the proverbial struggle bus, by comparison, the IRL was an embarrassment of riches. St. Pete saw an entry list of 21 cars, most of them adorned with recognizable liveries and full-season consumer-based sponsors. The series was also quite technically diverse, especially compared to the modern IndyCar series. 3 engine manufacturers, Honda, Chevrolet, and Toyota, and 2 chassis manufacturers, Dallara and Panos, meant that no less than 5 unique vehicle combinations would do battle for victory over 100 laps on the streets of St. Petersburg. On the driver's side, hype was already beginning to build for a young woman named Danica Patrick. While Danica Mania hadn't quite started yet, she was clearly a powder keg of mainstream potential, just waiting on a spark on the national stage for her star to take off. But for today, Danica is only a supporting actor, not the star of the show. And to get that show on the road and begin this new era of IRL racing, there really was no more appropriate person to give the command to start engines than Tony George.
Welcome to the 2005 St Petersburg Honda Grand Prix. Indy's Car Series drivers, start your engines!
Let's take a look at the starting grid. Bryan Herta opens the road racing era of the IRL with a pole position. Alongside is Helio Castroneves, who scored his first career win on the streets of Detroit. Tony Kanaan is the 2004 Series champion and starts alongside his teammate Dario Franchitti. Tomas Inge is the fastest Chevy in the field, and Sam Hornish was the winner in Phoenix. Kosuke Matsura has the fastest Panos, and Thomas Scheckter usually brings home either the trophy or the steering wheel. Dan Wheldon is the Homestead winner, and Ryan Briscoe is a test driver for the Toyota F1 team. Scott Dixon hasn't won a race since Richmond in 2003, and Vitor Mira is a top qualifying Rahal Letterman driver. Red Bull Cheever Racing locks out row 7 with Alex Barron and Champ Car refugee Patrick Carpentier. Danica Patrick is beginning to be touted as a rookie sensation, while Darren Manning continues to struggle at Chip Ganassi Racing. Buddy Rice is the Indy 500 champion, and Roger Yasukawa drives for Brian Reinbold Racing. Ed Carpenter is making his first road course start ever. While Scott Sharp is not lacking in experience, he's the 91 and 93 Trans Am champion. And starting alone at the rear is AJ Foyt IV, also in his first ever road race and making a rare appearance driving a Panos chassis. There were many concerns going into the weekend about the quality of the racing that the IRL drivers could put on. Many of them hadn't raced on a road course in nearly 3 years, and as you've heard, at least 2 of them had never raced a car on a road course before at all. Practice and qualifying had been marred by several accidents, and detractors figured the race would be more of the same. Before the start, ESPN talks to 3 different team owners: Doug Bowles, Roger Penske, and Michael Andretti. I wonder if any of them will go on to bigger and better things. The talk is over, the green flag is out, and Bryan Herta gets a jump as the IRL heads into its first ever right-hand turn. It's clean, and Thomas Scheckter proves on lap 1 that his aggressive style of starts aren't limited to oval tracks. But at least for the first 10 laps of the race, this is the last pass you'll see on the TV coverage. The leaders run line to stern until they hit lap traffic on lap 13. Whoops! Crash! First-time road racer AJ Foyt IV tries to give the faster car of Helio Castroneves room through the tight turn 11-12 chicane. But it wasn't enough room, and Helio collects Foyt and deposits them both into the concrete wall. One of the front row starters is out before the race really begins. Most of the teams take advantage of the yellow to make their first pit stop of the day. Fast work by the Panther Racing crew gets Thomas Scheckter out ahead of leader Bryan Herta, while Tony Kanaan gets a penalty for running over an air hose on his stop and will have to start at the rear of the field. And now we're crashing under yellow. Ed Carpenter got a wave around but looped it trying to catch up to the field. And oh boy, we're still wrecking. More problems as the field stacks up to avoid Carpenter. Thomas Inge smashes into the back of Roger Yasukawa. After an eventful caution period that lasts over 12 laps, the race gets back to green with several cars that did not pit now leading the field. Ryan Briscoe leads over a charging Danica Patrick, while Tony Kanaan gets aggressive trying to make his way back up to the front of the field. Pretty soon, Briscoe has shaken off the challenge of Danica and begins to stretch out his lead. At this point in history, Target Chip Ganassi Racing has not won a race in over a year. 26 races to be exact. This is Briscoe's first season in IndyCar and has already torn up a lot of Chip's equipment in 3 races. But as we know, Chip likes winners, and Briscoe seems to have the pace to do that today. Nope, it's not another replay. Ed Carpenter is backwards again, bringing out another yellow. This allows the drivers that stayed out on the previous caution to pit, and Bryan Herta cycles back for the lead of the race. Another crash! This time it's Scott Sharp. but he definitely had some serious help from Dario Franchitti, an unfortunate turn of events. The race finally settles into a pace as Andretti Green Racing holds the top 3 positions, but the entire field needs to make one more pit stop to make it to the finish. Dario Franchitti's team doesn't get a full load of fuel into the ARCA X machine, while Ryan Briscoe's team makes what is a very rare strategy call in IndyCar racing and chooses not to change tires on their final pit stop. As things cycle out of the pits, it's Briscoe leading, the light on fuel Franchitti second, with Darren Manning and Tomas Scheckter in hot pursuit. No, wait, Schechter's in the wall. Yellow! Dario pits for fuel, so the battle for the win will come down to the Ganassi drivers of Briscoe and Manning, and the drivers from Andretti Green, Dan Wheldon and Tony Kanaan. On the restart, Kanaan passes Wheldon and sets off in hot pursuit of the Ganassi duo. TK takes no prisoners with Darren Manning, body slamming him out of second place. And we got another car spinning, as Kosuke Matsuura puts the chrome horn to poor Scott Dixon. No caution! We're staying green. TK is right on the rear wing of Briscoe. I don't think Tony Kanaan will be denied today. Another crash, this time it's Sam Hornish and Tomas Inga, with a graphic example of how Delaras are made, and setting up yet another restart with 10 laps to go. TK tries Briscoe around the outside of turn 1. Can't get it done, but has another run into turn 4. Oh, big block from Briscoe! And that move would not go unpunished. On the back straight, TK bulldozes Briscoe into the tires under braking. While he had made that move work on Darren Manning, this time it cost TK, as teammate Dan Wheldon slips underneath Kanaan and into the lead of the race. And there Dan would stay, leading the charge for Andretti Green Racing, as they finished an incredible and unprecedented 1, 2, 3, 4, with Dario Franchitti taking third and pole sitter Brian Herta in fourth. Let's take a look at the full field rundown for the 2005 Honda Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. Dan Wheldon wins what would end up being his only road or street course win in his IndyCar career. Tony Kanaan would later describe this race as the one that got away from him, and Dario Franchitti had a fantastic recovery drive after having to refuel late in the race, and Brian Herta rounds out what is a perfect day for the Andretti Green Racing team. Vitor Meira has a characteristically quiet 5th place finish, while Scott Dixon somehow recovered from his spin to finish 6th place in the field. Buddy Rice was another driver with a quiet top 10 finish. Ditto Patrick Carpentier, the highest finishing of the Red Bull Cheever team. Darren Manning manages to bring home 9th for Chip Ganassi Racing after being nerfed by Tony Kanaan, and Alex Barron rounds out the top 10, the second of the Red Bull cars. Roger Yasukawa recovered from his crash under caution to finish 11th. Danica Patrick struggled with a mechanical issue to finish 12th. Kosuke Matsuura was black flagged due to the damage inflicted on his car from hitting Scott Dixon, and Ryan Briscoe is perhaps the most disappointed driver of all, ending up in the tires while leading the race. You saw Sam Hornish Jr. and Thomas Enge crash, as well as Thomas Scheckter, both Panther cars failing to finish, meaning no Chevrolet engines finished the race either. Scott Sharp ended up in the wall, and Ed Carpenter was parked after his second spin. And a disappointing race for Helio Castroneves, after the day starting with such promise on the front row. AJ Foyt finishes where he started, in 21st position. It's true, March 6, 2005 would be a day that changed IndyCar racing forever. In 2023, the series now hosts 12 road and street events, far outweighing the ovals on the calendar. This might have been the greatest weekend the Andretti family has ever had. Not only did they promote a successful race, sweep the top 4 positions, but they also won the Infinity Pro Series race with a young driver named Marco Andretti. I hope you've enjoyed this retrospective of the 2005 St. Petersburg Grand Prix. I think I might do more of these in the future, and of course, I'll be covering the 2023 event in person this weekend. So if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video.